On February 14, 2018, Nicholas Cruz murdered 17 people at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Without much surprise, the Republicans said the victims were in their thoughts and prayers, and the Democrats called for gun control. Out of the shooting arose a movement of sorts. It is too early to tell what is going to happen with that movement. The movement did organize walkouts at various high schools throughout the United States on March 14, 2018. It also has a March for Our Lives scheduled for March 24th in Washington, D.C. and other cities. This is an emotional issue. Of all the horrible things that could happen to a person, one of the really bad things is to have their child killed. The goal of the march is to end school shootings. Even if the three specific demands of the march are met, school shootings will not end. If I had a solution to the problem, I would be quite willing to share it with all. The problem with the school shootings is that all the things that could be done to reduce the probability of the shootings are worse than the shootings themselves. I will now show you the petition that goes along with the march. The petition calls for three things. First, a ban on assault weapons. The definition of assault weapon is open to debate. For purposes of this video, I will take it to mean any semi-automatic rifle that looks dangerous. Second, it calls for a ban on high-capacity magazines, duly noting that they probably don't understand how a gun works. They also call for limiting the number of bullets a gun can fire at one time. Most guns fire only one bullet at one time. Third, they call for universal background checks. There is a thing called the Second Amendment to the Constitution. I do not think it is particularly well written, and it is written for an era in which things were much different than the era we live in. I have not read all the Federalist Papers. The Federalist paper that was written dealing with the Second Amendment is Federalist Paper 46. At the time it was written, communication was nowhere near as fast as it is now. For example, the Battle of New Orleans was fought about 2 weeks after the War of 1812 was over. Neither side had heard that the war was over. Federalist Paper 46 more or less said that everyone has guns. It was sort of like that most people wear clothes. At the time, the population of the United States was about 3 million. At the time, there was a formula that said that it required about 100 people to support one soldier. And that means that the United States would be able to have an army of about 30,000 people. At the time, there were approximately 500,000 militiamen in the country. So by keeping the militia, the federal government could not wage war on the various states because they would be vastly outnumbered. There are some flaws with that argument, but that is the argument it made. The Second Amendment contains the ambiguous phrase, "The right to bear arms shall not be infringed." If you believe that inmates of supermax prisons should not have AR-15s. You believe in gun control. The only question remaining is how much gun control do you believe in? Getting back to the Second Amendment, do the words "shall not infringe" refer to the right to bear arms, or do they mean that anyone can have any type of firearm they choose? We have the Supreme Court. They are the ones who decide what is or is not constitutional. They have interpreted the Second Amendment as people do have a right to bear arms. However, the types of arms they can bear can be restricted. Getting back to the march. Their first goal is to ban assault rifles. The whole school shooting phenom, for the most part, started with the shooting at Columbine High School. There was the shooting at the University of Texas before that, but the phenom seems to have started with the shooting at Columbine. When that shooting occurred, there was a federal ban on assault rifles. That lasted from September 13th, 1994 to September 13th, 2004. During the shooting, one of the shooters used a Hi-Point 995 carbine. That gun was made to conform to the restrictions of the federal ban on assault weapons that was in place at the time. From this, it is clear that banning assault rifles will not prevent all school shootings. There was some question if a ban on assault weapons would be upheld by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been ducking that issue. If I had to wager money on whether or not they would uphold such a ban, I would bet that they will. They have refused to hear cases dealing with those bans, and the lower courts had upheld the bans, so that would mean that the actions of the Supreme Court have effectively upheld such bans. The second goal of the march is to ban high-capacity magazines. One of the shooters in the Columbine shooting had 13 10-round magazines, so that didn't deter him either. Finally, they want universal background checks. Nicholas Cruz passed his background check, so background checks don't work either. Additionally, there was a the church shooting down in Texas. That guy was able to get a gun because people failed to put his name in the list of people who should be banned from having firearms. So even if the march got all three of its goals, school shootings will continue to occur. One of the problems we have these days is our sources for news. For the most part, the news does tell the truth. However, the main fault of it is what they deem as newsworthy. I recently rewatched the movie Network. That was from 1976. I would recommend it to anyone who wants to understand what the news business is about. I will now show you a stunning graphic. Even though it looks more like a trapezoid, if you look at the larger square, that represents about the average annual death rate of people in the United States due to smoking-related diseases. The white square represents the amount of death due to gun homicides. The little black square represents the amount of death due to rifles, of which assault rifles are a subset. The question then becomes, why are we worried about the little black square when the other squares are so much bigger. The United States Supreme Court has found that there is a right to have handguns. If you look at the guns that cause the vast majority of gun problems, it is the handgun. And the Supreme Court has said that you have a right to have them. With regards to the March for Our Lives, it will give some young people an opportunity to have their say. When all is said and done, more will be said than done. This movement will cause some embarrassing moments for certain members of Congress who get a lot of money from the NRA.